Okay, so one more time, we are looking at how does acquiring the loft room change Thea, and we're going to read this excerpt. And as I read, I want y'all to think about what would I say? How is Thea changed? How does she become different or evolve? Okay, this is from The Song of the Lark by Willa Cather. It says, "Winter was long in coming that year. Throughout October the days were bathed in sunlight, and the air was clear as crystal. The town kept its cheerful summer aspect. The desert glistened with light. The sand hills every day went through magical changes of color. The scarlet sage bloomed late in the front yards. The cottonwood leaves were bright gold long before they fell, and it was not until November that the green on the tamarisks began to cloud and fade. There was a flurry of snow about Thanksgiving, and then December came on warm and clear." All right, so this first paragraph talks about winter being long in coming. Okay, just meaning winter was slow to arrive. It stayed warm for a while. And if you kind of didn't understand some of the visual imagery that they were giving, the last couple lines say there was a flurry of snow around Thanksgiving, and then December came on warm and clear. So even in December, it was still warm. All right, so that is paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. Thea had 3 music pupils now, little girls whose mothers declared that Professor Wunsch was much too severe. They took their lessons on Saturday, and this, of course, cut down her time for play. She did not really mind this because she was allowed to use the money. Her pupils paid her 25 cents a lesson to fit up a little room for herself upstairs in the half-story. It was the end room of the wing, and was not plastered, but was snugly lined with soft pine. The ceiling was so low that a grown person could reach it with the palm of the hand, and it sloped down on either side. There was only one window, but it was a double one and went to the floor. In October, while the days were still warm, Thea and Tilly papered the room, walls and ceiling in the same paper, small red and brown roses on a yellowish ground. Thea brought a brown cotton carpet, and her big brother Gus put it down for her one Sunday. She made white cheesecloth curtains and hung them on a tape. Her mother gave her an old walnut dresser with a broken mirror, and she had her own dumpy walnut single bed, a blue washbowl, and a picture which she had drawn at a church fair lottery. At the head of her bed she had a tall, round wooden hat crate from the clothing store. This, standing on end and draped with cretonne, made a fairly steady table for her lantern. She was not allowed to take a lamp upstairs, so Ray Kennedy gave her a railroad lantern by which she could read at night. Okay, and as I'm reading this, I'm going, oh, I totally forgot. Because it said they paid her 25 cents per lesson. And we forgot to read over at the top, the italicized part over at the beginning. Always do that. But it says 11-year-old Thea, an aspiring vocalist, teaches piano lessons in Moonstone, Colorado in the late 1800s. Okay, that context for sure helps here. So in paragraph 2, it talks about she had these 3 pupils. They paid her 25 cents a lesson, and she used that money to make her room, to make it her own. She was allowed to use the money to fit up a little room for herself upstairs in the half story. And it talks about the walls being slanted, right? Like imagine being up in the attic, right? You've got those hard attic, right, ceilings that sloped. They papered the room, meaning putting wallpaper on it. She had an old walnut bed. She got this. So it's talking about her bringing her stuff in for her room up in the attic. All right. Paragraph 3 says, in winter, this loft room of Thea's was bitterly cold, but against her mother's advice, and Tilly's, she always left her window open a little way. Thea asked Dr. Archie about the window, and he told her that a girl who sang must always have plenty of fresh air, or her voice would get husky, and that the cold would harden her throat. The important thing, he said, was to keep your feet warm. On very cold nights Thea always put a brick in the oven after supper, and when she went upstairs she wrapped it in an old flannel petticoat and put it in her bed. The boys, who would never heat bricks for themselves, sometimes carried off Thea's, and thought it a good joke to get ahead of her. All right, so it was always cold. Even though this first winter where they're talking about winter was slow to come, here the winter finally hit and she was really cold. So she would put a brick in the oven, get it out, wrap it up, and put it in the foot of her bed to keep her feet warm. Okay. Sometimes the boys would, her brothers would take it. Sounds about right. Okay. Paragraph 4 says, when Thea first plunged in between her red blankets, the cold sometimes kept her awake for a good while. After half an hour or so, a warm wave crept over her body and round sturdy legs. She glowed like a little stove with the warmth of her own blood, and the heavy quilts and red blankets grew warm wherever they touched her, though her breath sometimes froze on the coverlid. Before daylight her internal fires went down a little, and she often wakened to find herself drawn up in a tight ball, somewhat stiff in the legs, but that made it all the easier to get up. All right, so it says she'd sometimes be cold. After a little bit, she would warm up, and then she would wake up cold again. Paragraph 5. The acquisition of this room was the beginning of a new era in Thea's life. Okay, so think about what our prompt is. How does acquiring the loft room change Thea? Well, this line says a lot, so this paragraph might be important here. The acquisition of this room was the beginning of a new era in Thea's life. It was one of the most important things that ever happened to her. Hitherto, except in summer, when she could be out of doors, she had lived in constant turmoil. The family, the day school, the clamor about her drowned the voice within herself. In the end of the wing, separated from the other upstairs sleeping co-room, in the end of the wing, separated from the other upstairs sleeping rooms by a long, cold, unfinished lumber room, her mind worked better. She thought things out more clearly. Pleasant plans and ideas occurred to her which had never come before. She had certain thoughts which were like companions, ideas which were like older and wiser friends. She left them there in the morning, when she finished dressing in the cold, and at night, when she came up with her lantern and shut the door after a busy day, she found them awaiting her. So this one says it changed her, right? It's one of the most important things that ever happened to her. Those might be good quotes to use in our writing here in a little bit. Okay, so it's saying hitherto, you could look that up if you didn't know, but it's just saying up until now, she had lived in turmoil with all the noise and the sound. She had no time to reflect, to think, to be alone with her thoughts. But now she's able to do that. Okay. All right. Paragraph 6. From the time when she moved up into the wing, Thea began to live a double life. During the day, when the hours were full of tasks, she was one of the Kronborg children, but at night she was a different person. On Friday and Saturday nights she always read for a long while after she was in bed. She had no clock, and there was no one to nag her. Okay, so this again just shows how it changed her, because she was able to be alone with her own thoughts. She had a double life where during the day she was busy doing chores, all the things, and then she had quiet time to herself at night. Okay. All right, so once more, here is our prompt. Explain how acquiring the loft room changes Thea. And this is showing a rubric for how these things are graded. Okay, score point 0, I'm starting over here in the bottom right. Score point 0, there might be a thesis statement. There might be a paragraph. There's text, there may be text evidence, but there might not. If there is text evidence, it might be irrelevant. So there might be a quote, but it doesn't apply to what we're talking about. And the response lacks an understanding of the writing purpose. So if you write, and we'll see, if you write something too short, you may just get a 0, okay? Because they can't tell that you even understand the full purpose. All right. Going up from there, if y'all see the number 1, so I'm in the top right. Ones, a thesis is going to be present, but it's not going to be developed. So again, this one, not developed meaning you just haven't written enough to fully show that you understand what the prompt is asking. Okay, so it's short. Organization is minimal or weak. So you may or may not have paragraphs. Remember writing in paragraphs where you drop down and indent. That's going to be helpful, breaking up to paragraphs. That third bullet point says evidence is insufficient. So it's not good, or it's mostly irrelevant. It says explanation is insufficient from that, and the expression of ideas is ineffective. Okay, so the meaning may be vague or unclear. All right, going down to the bottom left, a score point 2. This would be where the thesis is present and it's developed, it's presented, but it's not as good as it could be, basically, to put it just short and sweet. The focus may not always be consistent. How many of you, sometimes you'll be writing and then you're like, oh wait, what was I talking about? And then you have to get back on track. So it may kind of weave off task a little bit, or not be focused. Organization may be limited. So just the sentence to sentence, how all those things connect, like from one to the next, that kind of organization may not be there. Or we could be talking about paragraphs still. The evidence is limited. So again, you may have text evidence that's solid, but it may not be fully explained. And then the expression of ideas is basic. So sometimes your message may be weakened by how you write, or your word choice may be vague. And then score point 3, again, we're getting up to the better ones, the best ones. These are the ones where you can easily tell the thesis statement. Everything is unified. It's easy to follow. The reader doesn't have to go back and like reread, like, wait, what did you mean? The reader shouldn't have to figure that out. Okay. Organization, again, with the paragraphs is good, and sentence to sentence is clear. The text evidence that is chosen, it is specific, it is well chosen, and it's relevant. It matches the prompt and answers the prompt fully. Okay. Or supports your thesis statement fully, I guess I should say. Okay. What else? And then the expression is clear and effective. Okay, so you go from a 0, which is too small, doesn't say enough, I can't tell if you even know what we're writing about, all the way up to everything is unified, coherent, organized, purposeful. Okay. All right. So there are also conventions, okay, that we have on here, just showing if the reader has to go back and try to figure out what is being written or what you meant, that's going to be a problem. If you have some errors, like even the higher ones, there are a few errors, but they don't impact the clarity. If you have so many errors that the writer can't understand, or the reader can't understand what you're trying to say, you're down in the 0 to 1 range. Okay, so always go back and double check for those errors, okay, to help make it easier on your reader. All right, questions about any of that?